Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's TurfNet University webinar. I'm your host, John Reitman, and our guest today is Maggie Reiter of the University of California Extension Service, and she's going to be talking to you today about weed control and herbicide use and alternatives for things like glyphosate, which is all over the news lately. So I want to thank her for putting this together, a very timely topic. First, I'm a two-part series we're doing this spring on weed control. The second, in a few weeks, we'll have Dr. David Gardner of Ohio State. He's going to come on and talk to us about some other weed control and herbicide options as well. So definite thanks to Maggie for joining us here today, and all of you as we go through a very challenging time. And quick shout out to our corporate partners at Brandt and BASF. So if you have any questions for Maggie, go ahead and pop those in. We do have a poll coming up for you in just a few minutes. So hang on for that. And Maggie, whenever you're ready, you go ahead and take it away.
All right, thanks, John. I'm going to turn off the webcam just so I can lean in. I'm going to like hunch over my laptop and try to talk closer to the microphone. So sorry to everybody. I don't have, right. I hope the sound quality is okay.
Perfect.
Holler if it gets bad for some reason. So yeah, my name is Maggie Reiter. I work for University of California Cooperative Extension. I work in Central California. I focus on turfgrass and also have some other urban horticultural responsibilities. I serve, people in the various aspects of urban landscape management. Spend most of my time in turf and weed science and expanding IPM adoption with my clientele. So like John was saying, a lot of recent concerns about public health risks of glyphosate, which is, as we know, a popular pesticide that's used to control weeds, have led to a lot of increased bans or restrictions in California municipalities, cities, counties, school districts, especially. So my, turf and landscape clientele have this rapidly evolving need to identify and implement alternatives to glyphosate. So I've tried to conduct some research, to generate new information to address this, and spend a lot of time consulting with different groups on their IPM plans, ranging in in size and complexity. And so all this time, it's been like the last 2 years or so, has really distilled my understanding of the trade-offs that are associated with organic herbicides and other glyphosate alternatives. And that's the ultimate message that I want to communicate today. Trying to click to the next slide. Oh, there we go. Okay, so let's start with why do we even control weeds? I like to start with this concept, and it was first presented by my colleague John Roncaroni. His name was on the first slide there, so I took it from him. And he always starts with, people like the public have really forgotten why we control weeds, just like they've forgotten, why we control rodents. Like rodenticides are a big point of contention right now in California. It's because they carry very harmful diseases to humans, and weeds can have very harmful effects on our turfgrass landscapes, right? So without controlling weeds, we would have all these problems. They compete with the native or desirable turf plants. They're going to reduce the functions of turf surfaces, especially ones that are used for high-level recreation like golf and sports fields. They reduce aesthetics of ornamental landscapes. They can hinder visibility, in transportation networks. I mean, like roadsides. They can impact human health with allergen exposure. In California, a big concern is contribution to fire and wildland fuel loads. And then, established weeds can promote other pests by providing refugia for rodents or something like that. And then, of course, and this is a basic concept of IPM. In order to control weeds, we need to ID them properly, and we need to understand their biology. So here's a little refresher on what makes a plant a good weed. These are the ideal characteristics of weeds. Right, the first line there is like germination requirements fulfilled in many environments, non-specialized germination. Next one is, seed dormancy, easy to overcome, rapid seedling growth through the vegetative phase to flowering, very fast reproduction, long seed production, no need for pollinators, always, produces seed. The seed can be dispersed by different mechanisms. Let's see, towards I guess I can get my cursor up, vigorous perennials, vegetative reproduction options, as well as, by seed or something. And they're very competitive with other plants. So, this whole conversation about glyphosate alternatives and weed control has really been a good platform to bring up some of these, again, just basic IPM concepts and reiterate them and remind people of why all of this stuff is important. So let's do a little background on glyphosate. Why are we here today? This is just to get us warmed up. I think we all know, glyphosate is an herbicide. It's been available since the 1970s. It's a general use pesticide that controls weeds. You apply it to the leaves of plants. It's very popular because it has a lot of wide applications, useful for essentially all annual and perennial plants, grasses, sedges, broadleaves, woody vegetation. And it can be used in a lot of different sectors: home, lawns and garden, golf and sports, ornamentals, agricultural systems, range and forest land, aquatics. And then here's a little sampling of some of our California municipality bans. This is just a little snippet from, I think it's like a lawyer webpage that has a really comprehensive list of kind of what's going on. We can look at some of these. There's, City of Concord, a school district voted to ban glyphosate. This one's a county, Contra Costa County, which is in the Bay Area. They are planning to phase out Roundup use in parks by the end of this year. Let's see, some of them can get kind of specific. Lodi here is banning Roundup within 25 feet of playgrounds. Some other ones are banning it around water fountains or areas like that. Again, down at the bottom, banned use at city parks, banned use at city-owned property. So it's mostly public municipalities, like I said, cities, counties, school districts especially, which often includes golf courses, the public sector or municipality golf courses. And this is a really interesting one in Thousand Oaks, which is down in Southern California, because it was this local legislation was specifically about golf courses. So the city banned using Roundup at the city golf course. That was it. And you can see that this kind of subheading there is turf has to be removed by mechanical means or other means. So that's the only one I know of that specifically targets golf courses. But golf courses, in a lot of our sports fields are included in different municipality, oversight. So now I have the poll. John, can you take over or tell me what you need? John, do you copy?
Yep. I'm here.
Okay. Well, so this poll, I want to get an idea of the viewers here. What, if you have if you're managing a turf facility or operation, what are your limitations on glyphosate use? And I've listed the main ones that I think, that I'm seeing: no glyphosate or other conventional or synthetic herbicides. Some are just no glyphosate, but other conventional herbicides are okay. And then, like I mentioned, glyphosate limits in certain areas, like around playgrounds or around drinking fountains or picnic areas, but not necessarily across all of the facility. And then no limitations at all. And then if there's an other, let me know.
Yep, only about half of you have voted so far, so we'll leave this up for another few seconds.
Oh, I think I don't see it. So the poll is up, right?
Yeah, it's up.
It's
We've about 70% have voted so far. So
okay.
I have a little
trying to look at.
Yeah, I think it'll show you all the results as soon as we close it.
Oh, okay.
But it tells me how many people have voted, so
I gotcha.
we're at 80%.
Looks like the attendee list has some people that are researchers that I know. They don't have a facility.
Yeah, we're at 80%. Seems to be holding there. So.
Okay. All right.
Now, are you able to see the results?
No.
Okay. Evidently it only shows them to
Interesting.
can everybody who has voted, well, I don't know if they can or not. Anyway, no limitations on glyphosate use was the most popular answer with 56%,
Okay.
followed by limitations in some but not all areas at 21%. No glyphosate allowed, but other herbicides are okay, 14%, and other receiving 5%, and no herbicides of any kind also receiving 5%.
Okay. All right. So am I back on?
Good question. I think so.
Okay. I'm going to proceed.
Yeah, we don't do a lot of polls, so.
There we go. Okay. This is just a resource for people that are, it sounds like some of us are still not in a point where glyphosate is completely banned. And I'm just sharing a resource that is very helpful for communicating about glyphosate to lay people or, maybe landscape or turf managers. This is a glyphosate general fact sheet from the National Pesticide Information Center, which is out of Oregon State University. And I think this is, 3 or 4 page PDF, but it's very nicely laid out, sort of like FAQs. The first one, is what is glyphosate? Then it goes into what is its risks to everything from humans to aquatic invertebrates to, how does it work? That type of thing. Again, written very well in a way for a lay person. And then another quick resource is this one, which was developed by a team of my peers and weed scientists here at the University of California Agricultural Natural Resources. That's our extension division. And it's not really about what's our take on glyphosate, but it's more to answer this question here of why do our University of California publications include information on glyphosate or include it as an option? Some people are very concerned about that and think that we should not be having glyphosate listed on a lot of our IPM publications and materials. So this is just a response to that. I think this is a couple pages. You can find this PDF online easily, by just searching for it. And it pretty much just says, University of California is not a regulatory body. And because it's not banned by the EPA or the Cal EPA, that it's still a registered product and it's still available for use. So let's get into the alternatives to glyphosate. And I gotta sort of clarify that, right, glyphosate is a non-selective herbicide. So the alternatives that I'm covering today are all non-selective, right? We tend to need more selective herbicides to manage weeds within turf grass or within desirable turf. And non-selective herbicides are more used when there's a turf renovation. I guess sometimes you can use it to selectively control weeds within a tolerant turf grass, right? Like spraying low rates of glyphosate over fine fescues. But I think the info here is going to be more meaningful to non-selective weed control in places like ornamental landscape beds around buildings, hardscapes like parking lots or baseball fields, bunker edges, those types of places where we're doing non-selective weed control. And here it is, what can I use instead of glyphosate? Here's kind of some of most of the options. And this is where I usually enter the conversation with turf managers. I'm not confronted with questions about if glyphosate is safe or if it causes cancer. I come in at this point, usually where I'm called upon by clientele, to support them after a decision has been made, often by higher management, administration, or elected officials that want to cease glyphosate use. And so here's a suite of options. I'm going to kind of touch on each of these quick And then I'll really dig into your organic herbicides at the end. So we have, sanitation, grazing and mowing, tillage and cultivation, mulch and cover crops, biological controls, sort of levels of lethal heat, like flaming, steaming, solarization, and then again, organic herbicides towards the end. So an example of sanitation and as well as like tillage and cultivation. This idea of, well, one, prevent weeds from being introduced, right, by cleaning equipment. Be careful what new soil you're bringing into a landscape, or make sure you're having high quality sod that doesn't carry weeds. But also, if you're going to do some type of renovation where you're tilling or cultivating bare soil, do this pre-irrigation. I don't think this is considered enough. A single pre-irrigation here can control 16 to 50% of potential weeds. And this is based off of research conducted in agricultural sectors. This is in a lettuce field by Steve Fenimore. He's a University of California specialist. He does a lot with organic vegetable weed control. So you can see, like on the left picture, there's no pre-irrigation here, right? There's a row of lettuce or leafy greens in there. That's a desirable plant. They were planted at the same, at one time, and then irrigated, and then this is the weed pressure that came up. But this pre-irrigation is where they irrigate the bare field 1 week, prior to seeding the lettuce, and down here is 2 weeks. Let kind of an initial flush of weeds come up, and then terminate those weeds with additional tillage or some non-selective herbicide. And then you can see, then after that, seed the lettuce. And this is how much, how dramatic the reduction in weeds is. And again, the number is 16 to 50%, depending on a lot of different factors. But this is a very simple thing to do that can really pay off. And I realize it does take a little bit of time. It's going to extend your renovation of 1 week or 2 weeks, but it can be really effective. And I think it's well worth it. Grazing or mowing, right? This is really applicable to naturalized areas on golf courses, as well as open space parks. Carefully timed mowings or grazing can reduce weeds tremendously, or invasive plants, right? So here's a golf course superintendent in the Bay Area, Ryan Maher. He uses targeted grazing, where he hires over 500 goats here to reduce some of the vegetation in their naturalized areas, and they're on the property for about 6 days. He's tweeted about this a lot, and he's gotten some press about it. So he works at Contra Costa Country Club, so you can look that up if you want more info about that. And if this is something that you want to do for your golf course or open space park, this is a blog post from one of my colleagues, Dan Macon. He's a rangeland advisor in Northern California area. This is a blog post that he put together last year. It's called, thinking about hiring a targeted grazing contractor. Here's a few things that you need to know. This is a very, helpful blog post. It's a pretty quick read, but it has this, key information on, where to begin. Where do you even find somebody to come and do grazing on your property? And then, what things do you need to be thinking about if you're going to try to proceed down this road? So again, just sharing this, you can go and look it up, and read it if you want more info. The lethal heat or, steams here, I guess this is flaming. So this is a propane flaming. You can get these devices, at like big box stores like Home Depot, that type of thing. You just, the caution is you have to be very careful about you or your staff throwing fire around, right? There'd be much lower risk on like hardscapes, like, this is a parking lot up here, or where there's just individual plants and bare soil, like down here. Less risk for, I guess, almost drift, you could call it, and off-target effects. And this is how it works, this lethal flaming. The plants are not burning, okay? That is something that people get wrong a lot too. You're not burning the plants down to the soil. All you're doing is you quickly just move this flame applicator over the leaves. Because water comprises a large percentage of the plant's total weight, when you heat up water, it's going to boil. So that causes the plant cells to burst or denature. And then the plants get this sort of glossy and wilted look, and then it will subsequently die. But you're not lighting the plant on fire. Here's a nice example I got off Twitter. I don't know this person, Paleo111, but I like this tweet. They say, I started edging bunkers this year with propane garden torch. Gives a nice brown edge, takes out the edge weeds, no chem, no tracking. And then does the weeds and flagstones or, on hardscape areas as well. But again, you have to be careful about stuff like this. All right. This is a headline from a random newspaper. Residential structure catches on fire after people use a propane torch to kill weeds. So the propane flamers are going to be hot, dry heat. Then we have steaming or foaming, which is hot, wet heat. So picture here are some examples of weed steamers and in action down in this image here. So the devices are quite cumbersome, but they are just involving water or some foam, but no chemicals are involved. So that's the advantage. In here, the water is pressurized and heated up, and then the hot steam travels through a hose, which would be, off the image here. And it comes out an applicator tip. It can be like a single nozzle. This one would be like a single nozzle, and that's what's in action in this picture too. Or maybe sort of like a cone. But there's also options like these miniature enclosed booms, sort of. It reminds me of a vacuum head. So here's a person using this weed steamer, right? This hose is connected to the water heat system that's off the image. And the person is able to use this in a very, high profile area around a playground where people are actively playing without the concerns about, chemical use. This is a video I want to show. Let's see if it will work. Yeah, I don't know if you can hear the sound. But that's how it works. So, this video I included to show that it's quite slow, right? So you have to hold this vacuum head over the weeds a little bit before you move it along. It's slow and it's loud. And these weed foamers and weed steamers, they're really popular in California with the parks and the school districts especially. But a local distributor recently told me they sold their first one to a golf course just last winter. This is to show again how it's working. It's very precise, right? It's on the left. This is the initial application. This is, you get a really nice crisp contrast here. But a month and a few days later, weeds are starting to come back. So it's going to require regular reapplications, just like a lot of post-emergent herbicides. Here's a picture of so that was all the weed steamer. This is the weed foamer. And this is what it looks like. It's shooting hot foam out of the tip here. Here it is kind of more diffuse within some weeds, and the foam, it holds the heat around the plant. And that's what, the marketing sort of claim is on why including foam is important, is to hold the heat around the plant, and it will, have better efficacy. So, kind of a quick summary on these are the two that I've seen in California. A few variations of that weed steamer that I was showing pictures of, and then this foam stream weed foamer. These are just the two that I've seen here. Mention of anything in this webinar does not mean endorsement. But they're both, what you need to understand is they are difficult to move around. There are some that have sort of like a rolling dolly that are smaller, but the majority of them are going to be on a utility cart or on the back of a truck. They're both noisy, with the weed steamer here on the left, I guess there is also an electrically powered one that's presumably quieter, but the foamer is still loud, but it's a little quieter than the steamer. The steamer is slower, but it's much more precise, as you saw, sort of the crisp lines around that picnic table area. And because the foam that comes out of the end kind of sits there for a little bit and holds the heat around the plant, you can move a little bit quicker, but it's less precise as the foam sort of expands. And then they're expensive, right? So 11 to 30K, depending on the size of the machine over here. This one starts at 45K. Plus, if you want to include, the labor time that goes into it, if you need to have a special utility vehicle to transport it, that could be easily another 20,000. But yeah, so they're expensive, but again, they provide a way to control weeds without the use of glyphosate or conventional herbicides. Now, let's go into the organic herbicides, and we're gonna spend the rest of the conversation here today on organic herbicides. And I gotta say, I'm really skipping the whole bit about other conventional or synthetic herbicides, as well as pre-emergent herbicides, right? So if you can't use glyphosate, but you can still use other herbicides, it's easy to just use something else. A lot of people are testing out other non-selective products like phenale or glufosinate, for example. Some people are trying combinations of like a broadleaf and a grass herbicide, like a speed zone or a Trimac plus fusilate, something like that would capture, the broadleaves and the grasses. Pre-emergents are really fantastic for those of us who knows how to use them and use them well. So we can use pre-emergents to prevent weeds from coming up in the first place. But I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to go right into the organic herbicides because they're the hot topic, and it seems like they are, I guess, in my opinion, the most approachable alternative. And I say that because the organic herbicides, it seems like they have the greatest impact because they're reducing sort of barriers to adoption, right? We're just swapping out herbicides, liquid formulations. It doesn't require new equipment. It doesn't require new knowledge or training for the applicator or how to use the new application equipment like the steamers or the flamers or something. So I think that's, there's fewer barriers to adoption of this. So it's an easy swap. And how do organic herbicides work in general? And I guess I should say, how do non-selective organic herbicides work? They're contact herbicides, so far. I'd be cautious of any one that suggests selectivity with no turf injury. One proven, I guess, organic or alternative herbicide to have selective activity is Fiesta, high rate of chelated iron. But again, I'm really focusing on the non-selectives here. So because they're non-selective, good spray coverage is essential. Then we can get, into conversations about nozzle technology and carrier rates and things like that. They're proven to work better on clear sunny days and when it's warmer or hotter, like ADF and above. And again, repeat applications are going to be needed for larger weeds or very weedy areas. And that's, that's a common sense thing. And it goes back to the basics on IPM of weeds. It is really vital to understand this part of the basic weed biology too, is you got to know where the weed, you got to know the weed and know where its growing points are, right? In grasses or grassy weeds, the growing points, the location of the meristem where the cells are dividing and new leaves are coming out, is the crown, which is often very protected at the base of the plant, like you can see in the picture. So a lot of broadleaf weeds, on the other hand, can have their meristems higher up in the plant canopy, so they're more exposed to damage from contact herbicides or from removal by mowing or grazing. And despite that, still a lot of our notorious broadleaf weeds and turf have that sort of basal rosette form where their growing point is protected down near the soil surface, so the weed can persist under constant mowing or defoliation. Right, so this is an example of when organic contact herbicide is applied to these different types of plants. It's only going to damage the tissue that it comes into contact with. So if you can't reach the crown of the grassy weed like over here, it's going to come back. And then on the left here, it's like a broadleaf clover. The applications get burned off the sort of top layer of the leaves, but the lower leaves are protected or didn't come into contact with the product, so they're just going to keep growing. As far as research on organic herbicides, there's little to no research in turf and ornamental settings, in my opinion. There is a lot of useful information that we can glean from organic agriculture. And, we need to understand that there is not any glyphosate alternative that's going to do the exact same thing that glyphosate does. But there are alternatives. And, like I was saying, turf and golf managers they're already figuring this out. And I've learned a tremendous amount from these people. So we're kind of behind here now I'm trying to generate some data to support superintendents and, contribute to the decision-making. But as academics, we usually want to do research that leads to policy or policy changes. But in this case, we're a bit back on our heels, right? The bans and policies are informing our research. All right, so this is from a few years ago. We're looking at, this is just a quick table from a research report on grassy weed control at different times when the weeds are treated at different ages or, different sizes, right? So size really matters. Along the left, the products that are tested here, this green match X is a lemongrass oil or plant oil. Green match period is a D-limonene, again, is a similar plant oil. The Matran is a clove oil. Weed or acetic acid is vinegar there, and that's a high, I guess horticultural grade acetic acid. And then the Weed Zap is a clove oil and cinnamon oil. So a lot of plant oils there, and then the vinegar product. And you can see that, so at different ages of the weeds, when the barnyard grass and crabgrass is 12 days old, 1 day after treatment with these, you're getting, various control up to 99%. But 15 days after treatment, 2 weeks, it kind of dips off, and you're down to like 25% control on most of them, 0% control on this one. But if you look at larger weeds that are 2 times the age, when the weeds are 26 days old, my cursor keeps going away there. 1 day after application, way less control. It's not significantly different from the untreated, right? And then 2 weeks after that, almost zero. No significant difference here, 0% control. So again, it's just the idea, treating or controlling the weeds when they're smaller is much more effective, especially with these organic contact herbicides. The size really matters. This is from an experiment looking at all vinegar products or acetic acid, right? So Nature's Glory up here, I have details down here. It's 25% acetic acid. This Burnout is 25% acetic acid as well. 5% acetic acid, that would be like the food grade vinegar that you can buy off the shelf, at a grocery store. It's only a 5% formulation. The ones that are used for herbicides are much higher, 20, 25, 30% acetic acid. And then the glyphosate is there as a comparison. So with one application, this is, the efficacy or weed injury. This is just on like a mode area. Right away, you're getting over 90% control in the vinegar products. Glyphosate is of course slower to work, but if we cruise through the time here, 2 weeks, 5 weeks, 9 weeks, you can see the numbers start to really sink off with the vinegar products, and then the glyphosate is taking effect and holding down or holding control a little bit longer. In 13 weeks, again, it just continues to decrease. Glyphosate is holding above 90%. And this bottom table is with 3 applications. And it's a similar story, although you get a little bit longer control, right? Up to 5 weeks, but it starts sinking off here after 9 weeks or so, 13 weeks. And then the glyphosate is the exact same. So they, in this case, the vinegar products, after 1 app or after 3 apps over time, they're not going to give you as good control as glyphosate would. So this is a field trial of some organic herbicide experiment that I did last summer. And this was looking at Bermuda grass response to organic, as well as some glyphosate-containing herbicides. We tested a handful, I think 5 or 6, or I'll go over this, organic herbicides versus glyphosate, and also Fusilade, which is the industry standard for Bermuda grass control. We also wanted to try mechanical removal, and so you can see that there's sod stripped or sod cut plots there, and then also solarization, which is done with that plastic. This we're looking at, or I did this on a 10-year-old stand of hybrid Bermuda grass. It was TIF sport in Central California. This is on the edge of a golf course driving range. And so the objective of this, we were trying to just compare these conventional and organic herbicides for control of Bermuda grass. And I tweeted something about this when I was out there setting it up or putting out the first applications, said like, oh, look, we're going to try to control Bermuda grass with organic herbicides. And then my friends on Twitter proceed to roast me. So you can see Mike Richardson says, good luck with that. Some of the best weed scientists over the last half century have been trying to crack that nut. Don't get your hopes up. Beth Gertol says also, us old folks here are here to crush your hopes. Solarization is not going to work, and it grew some damn fine crabgrass. So I'll say, rather I'm doing this experiment, or the objective is to want to validate that these organic herbicides or solarization won't work. And I just wanted to use Bermuda grass as a platform, right, to compare how the burn down occurs and how the recovery occurs. And we knew Bermuda grass would bounce back. Or you could say maybe too, it's a worst case scenario. Maybe someday we're all going to have to be trying to control Bermuda grass without glyphosate or Fusilade. So these are the ones that I used. The yellow color here, these are the organic approved herbicides, and then the purple is on the conventional or synthetic herbicides that contain glyphosate. So yeah, trade name, active ingredient, the percentage of active ingredient in the product, and then the application rate. Right, Avenger is a D-limonene, that's a plant oil. Same for, Burnout has a clove oil. Final Sand is a soap or soap of fatty acids. And then I'm going to skip ahead here. The Weed Farm is the vinegar. And it seems like, those are kind of the 3 big categories. There's a handful of products that are acetic acid or vinegar right here. There's a handful of different products that are what I would just say plant oils. And then there's the soaps or the ammoniated soaps of fatty acid. That's another kind of group of the organic herbicides. Suppress is kind of sort of on its own. It's, caprylic acid or capric acid. And then again, the sort of industry standards that we're comparing to are glyphosate. Ranger Pro is just a glyphosate containing product. And then glyphosate plus Fusilade or fluazafop. Again, that's the industry standard for control of Bermuda grass. So let's see, a few things to know. The percentage active ingredients in the formulated product, there's quite a range here, up to 2% to 70%. Let's not dwell on that. But what I do want to point out is the application rate. So for starters, when you read the labels, they're very easy to mix up as an applicator. Like they're just saying, they say like 20% solution, 25%, or 1 part product to 3 parts, water or carrier, that type of thing. So they're really easy to mix up. In fact, Weed Farm here, the vinegar is just 100% straight out of the bottle. You apply it. There's no water added, no dilution. And then the glyphosate, we use a very high glyphosate rate of 5 quarts per acre. And then the recommended glyphosate plus Fusilade rates for Bermuda grass control. One thing, there's an acidifier that's added to suppress that comes, for me, that came with the suppress product, this BioLink acidifier. The idea is you want to lower the pH in suppress as much as you can. That's going to make it more effective. And then we added non-ionic surfactants to the glyphosate and the Fusilade combos because it explicitly says that on the label for Ranger Pro and Fusilade. It says add a non-ionic surfactant, at this rate. There is some evidence that adding surfactants or adjuvants, that type of thing, to organic products can increase their efficacy, but none of these ones said anything about that on the label. So that's why I didn't do it. We use the highest label recommended rates for everything. Another important thing to note is the herbicide treatments were broadcast, applied with a carrier volume of 100 gallons per acre of water. And that's high. I usually don't do that because I don't like to carry around that much water. But that's because on the labels of all these organic herbicides, it recommends a very high carrier rate. And so because of that, I use the same carrier rate for glyphosate, and then you see it gets pretty low as far as a volume product per volume solution. And I should have probably used a lower carrier rate for glyphosate in this case, but again, I just wanted to keep it simple, keep it uniform. So I used a super high carrier rate that you normally wouldn't see for glyphosate. And it's also important to note applications, we made them in the middle of the summer, July 31st here, in the afternoon, a clear sunny day, and it was 90 degrees Fahrenheit outside, which is really hot. And, it's not really pleasant to be outside making herbicide applications at that time, but we wanted to optimize its efficacy. So that's why we did that. These are the plots, or this is what it looked like just maybe 1 hour, 90 minutes after the application. So I put out all the sprays, went and cleaned up my equipment, on the golf course, right there. And then on my way out, I went by it again, and this is what it looks like. All these brownish, blackish plots are the organic herbicides already kicking in. Like it's really immediate. And then 2 or 3 days later, this is what it looks like. Again, all these burned plots are the organic herbicides. That's just, that's how quickly they work. It goes from this to this in just a couple days. The green plots here are either controls or they're the ones that got treated with fusilated glyphosate. The data I'm going to present is NDVI here, normalized difference vegetation index. So this is a form of remote sensing, plant stress with a handheld sensor. It measures green reflectance, and again, we use this as a metric of plant health. So the range is 0 to 1. Higher would mean more green, like on the right, this is a 0.8, more green, less injury. And then on the left, here's an example of a plot that has 0.4, not as green. So lower means not green. And it could be red, it could be blue, but in this case, for turf, weed injury, or these pictures are from a drought trial, it usually just means brown. We also took light box images to kind of document things. So the light box captures images of the plots, from about 2 feet off the ground with the same sort of lighting. And I put all these pictures together in this sort of infographic just to illustrate, again, the visual story here. So we have, days after the initial application of just one application, right before the application, all the plots are green. That's good. That means we had a uniform field. Then we have the, control. These 5 here are the organic products. And then these are, our glyphosate and fusilade conventional herbicides. The control was, fine, no difference throughout. You can see the organic herbicides have this burn down right away after 1 day's peak at 2 or 3 days. They start to green up by a week, 2 weeks, and then they're back to no difference from the control after 3 weeks. Interestingly, burnout did not do anything at all, and I'll come back to that. Then down here, a different sort of response pattern on the synthetic systemic products. Glyphosate, it's going to take a week, 2 weeks to peak, provides better control. But the glyphosate plots even started to come back, and the fusilade plots too. You can see after 4 weeks, 5 weeks after the application. So here's some of the data, right? NDVI on the left. So the lower means more turf injury. The higher means green, or less turf injury. So we're looking at here Ranger Pro or glyphosate alone plus glyphosate. Sorry. Then we're looking at glyphosate plus the fusilade. The control plot is here in the black line, and it stays green throughout the whole time, or days after application are here on the bottom. And then you can see, the herbicide treatments and the asterisks show they're significantly different from the control at different over time, right? So it takes, again, their first, 3 or 4 days, there was no difference from control. Then it starts to separate after, I think, 5 or 6 days here. And again, it's going to hold down control. Significant difference from the control all the way up to, this is 42 days after the application. Here is the organic herbicides, right? So we have Avenger, that's one of the plant oils. Burnout, same there. Phynosand is the soap of fatty acids again. Suppress is the capric and caprylic acid combo. And then Weed Farm is the vinegar. Again, same story with the, or same layout, I guess. The untreated controls in black there. And then the herbicide is in blue. And when it's different from the control, we have significance. So with most of these organic herbicides, except for burnout, right away it starts to separate from the control. Right after day two, day 3, it's significantly different from control. It has an immediate burn down, but then then it slowly just starts to recover. You can see the Avenger and Weed Farm plots maintained, or sorry, I guess they recovered by. Well, get that back. They recovered by about 28 days after the application here. Weed Farm and Avenger. But there's a little bit difference here with Phynosand and Suppress. They recovered at about 19 days after the application. So a little bit of better efficacy among those. And I guess all I have to say about burnout is, again, it didn't do anything at all. And there is some other, I did find another publication from, I think it was Massachusetts Roadside Research, looking at a different product called that Matrin EC. It has a similar active ingredient of clove oil, and that also showed no effects or no difference from untreated control on roadside vegetation in Massachusetts. So I would not recommend burnout. And then another thing, we wanted to do was, because these, the organic products as well as the synthetic products, they're performing similarly. So what we wanted to do was, well, we tossed out burnout and then we grouped them, right? So let's just look at all the organic products versus all the conventional products. And what we did was, just to keep things even more simpler, we did contrasts, right? That showed, so what we're looking at here is the NDVI, it's a ratio of the difference between organic and conventional days, and then days after application. So if it's above 0 here, a positive value at the top here, it says, it indicates that the conventional herbicides had better efficacy than the organic herbicides. If the value is negative, that means the organic herbicides had better efficacy than the synthetic herbicides that we tested. So what I take from this is that the organic products had an advantage over the conventional products only for the first 5 to 6 days, and then it flips, right, about day 7 or 8 here. So organic herbicides are going to be useful if you want immediate control. And then this isn't quite as polished of a figure here, but we did second applications on a whole nother set of plots, and I just want to point out kind of the different patterns of these curves, right? So this is after one application of an organic product, burn down, recovery. We did a second application right here where it dips again 2 weeks after the initial one. So it burns down again, but it's just going to come back. So you'd have to keep hitting it, every 2 weeks to bounce that, keep that bouncing down. Same for Phynosand, burnout didn't do anything. And then, after 42 days or so, these are the two synthetic products, the glyphosate and fusilade, they start to come back up. They're still different from the control, but they start to recover. But with a second application after 14 days, it's going to hold down, a little bit longer. This is always really shocking to people when I present this. So this is the cost this is looking at the costs of the different products, right? And they're calculated out to be cost per 1,000 square feet. And this is a few years old, and it was first put together by Cheryl Willen, my colleague in Southern California. So some of these things have changes, but the trends, is still the same. So you have, these are all different organic products over here. Well, except for Finale. And then Fiesta is a selective one. But signal words, we'll come back to that. There's active ingredients in them, but you can see the costs, right? So the costs, $150 per a 2.5 gallon unit. But if we compute out to the cost per 1,000 square feet, glyphosate or Roundup is fairly cheap, right? Less than $1 per 1,000 square feet. Up here, Finale, that's a synthetic herbicide. That one's the cheapest, $2.17. But some of these organic products, like Burnout here, gets up to almost $30. Weed Zap, $27. So they get pretty expensive. That's what I want to say, especially for the high active ingredient load that you have to mix. This is a quick chart from the Xerces Society, which is a nonprofit famous for invertebrate conservation and pollinator protection. And they have, I found this I guess fact sheet from them looking at the toxicity of common organic approved pesticides, including herbicides right here, to bees. And it's not like they're all non-toxic. That's just what I want to say. Some have low toxicity to bees. Some are very highly toxic to bees. So all these things need to be, thoughtfully considered before switching or, taking over using all these organic herbicides. So this is, I think, my second or third last slide. This is the take-home message here, okay? These are the trade-offs that are going to be associated with weed control approaches using conventional glyphosate products or non-selective organic alternatives. So we have a few different, metrics about the product over here. I'll go through. The conventional glyphosate product we're using as an example is Roundup Pro Max, which is a standard glyphosate-containing product. And it was, it's one of the most sold glyphosate products from one of our local distributors. So that's why I picked it. And then just general notes on organic non-selective herbicides, right? Their mode of action, we talked about glyphosate is systemic. The organic ones are contact. The signal words, right? So a signal word is on every pesticide label. It's required by the EPA. And the signal word is about the acute toxicity to mammals like humans. And the signal word can be caution, warning, or danger, right? So caution is the lowest toxicity, danger is the highest or most toxic, and then warning is in between. So this glyphosate product, most of them, they just, most products that just contain the single active ingredient of glyphosate have a caution signal word, lower acute toxicity to people. The organic herbicides, they can have a range, caution, warning, even up to danger. And because of this, the PPE that's going to be required for glyphosate is just the California minimum PPE, which is a little bit higher than some other states I know. And that's a long sleeve shirt, long pants, shoes plus socks, protective eyewear, and chemical resistant gloves. So a lot of the organic herbicides, again, it varies a lot. Some are the California minimum PPE as well, but sometimes the labels will require chemical resistant footwear as well, coveralls. And some of the vinegar products have a danger label and even require wearing a respirator to apply them. I don't even do that. I have not been properly fitted for a respirator, so I try to not mess with that. Rate of injury, again, we've characterized this with some data and some pictures. You'll get visible injury from glyphosate 4 to 20 days, and then in hours to days with the organics. The reapplication frequency is going to be lower for glyphosate based off the label or in weed recovery rates, and then you're going to need a higher reapplication frequency on the organic herbicides. Lower volume of active ingredients required for the glyphosate products, it's often like a 3% or a 5% solution or something like that. You have to mix higher volumes of active ingredients for the organics, up to 20, 30% or straight 100%. And then the cost per application area is far cheaper with the glyphosate product, and it can get quite a bit higher with a non-selective organic herbicide. This table I published it in a trade magazine article last month. If you want to look that up with my associate, Carrie Winville Rojas, who's also an IPM advisor. The trade magazine is called CAPCA, is California Association of PCA. It's California thing, but everybody can access the article if you want, or I'll send you the PDF. Let me know. So I know I'm running out of time here. I'm gonna quick wrap up. Where are the organic herbicides best used? Spot treatments, where you want fast control within days. Small annual broadleaf weeds, of course, much more susceptible. And then if you have to, right, where other materials like conventional herbicides are going to be restricted. This just summarizes, these are the things that you can use instead of glyphosate. And then I will, that's all I have. Here's my contact info, the other people that I mentioned that contributed information to this presentation. If you need anything, please let me know. Catch me on Twitter. Yeah, that's all I have. So we can do some questions depending on time. I'll let John moderate that.
Excuse me. Yeah, so the first question we had come up, which was right out of the chute, are bans, and so we're going to get into the ban side of this, but are the bans and negative news stories going to spell the end of glyphosate, or did the recent EPA exoneration, which was actually, I think, just came out in January, of the active ingredient and its determination that it is still one of the safest herbicides of all time, overcome the negativity and save it for the industry?
Well, I'm not a toxicologist and I'm not a regulator. But I think that, based off my experience working with the people and the decision makers about this in different California municipalities, no, I don't think it's that meaningful, the recent EPA exoneration. And then there's the whole, that's sort of a regulatory, I guess, thing. But the liability, right? There's been some tremendous lawsuits that have been happening in California. The liability is so severe that I think a lot of our administrators and leaders are really not wanting to mess with that at all. So I don't think it's making that big of a difference. And I'm seeing continued interest in glyphosate alternatives.
Yeah, it's the whole history of the litigious side of this has been fascinating to follow.
Yeah.
And you can't help but feel sorry for the folks at Bayer who, I think, I'm not sure they knew what they were. I mean, I know they knew what they were buying when they bought Monsanto, but I'm not sure they knew the troubles they were inheriting. So that all is really unfortunate. What are as we'll hang on here for a few more minutes, and Mike Huck also, thanks for cluing us in there with the poll issue. As I said, I like to run as many polls and things like that as we can. We just don't do a lot of them. So, but anyway, are there resistance issues with organic products, or has there been enough work done on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that just the concept of resistance is, frequent applications of anything are going to drive the resistance potential. Even, in some agricultural systems, there's a lot of robotic weeders and things like that. And I think ultimately the weeds are just going to be able to grow in a way that, outsmarts the AI or the robot. So I certainly haven't seen it, and I don't know what it would look like. But just, any weed control or herbicide program that does not diversify active ingredients is going to be dangerous for contributing to resistance, in my opinion.
Another question here. Have you tried to spray bleach?
No, I haven't. I mean, And then this is something that comes up a lot with master gardeners is what about this? What about that? You know, what about this thing I have in my kitchen? I don't know. And if it's not, you know, if it's not labeled for control of weeds, I have not tried it. And I would wait until it is, but it could work, I suppose.
And I know we have a lot of other research folks on here. If anybody has any experience with some of these questions that come up, if anybody else has any experience with that and they want to chime in, please feel free to do so. Another comment here by Rob about the legal side of glyphosate. These monetary awards are totally out of relation to the facts. However, although I understand your point, yeah, and all those monetary awards, or most of them, I think, uh, have been dumbed down a little bit. Although not $1 hasn't been paid to anybody. I think most of those awards have been reduced. The funny thing about all that is in most of those cases, it's been the same judge and the same jury in just virtually every trial so far. And I don't want to get into that end of it too much, but
right.
it has been because everybody can read it, and we've done a lot on it, and not that I want to make it obvious that we fall on one side of the argument or the other, but over the past couple of years, we have published a lot of this stuff on TurfNet only for the purposes for which we're here today. As the story progresses, so that people aren't caught by surprise, at least try to keep them up to date on what are the most recent facts in the case. So,
right. And I spend a lot of time, you know, talking to my clientele, like parks and school district people, especially that, you know, they're asking, how do we navigate them? I always say, here's a little resources that I can contribute, like that glyphosate fact sheet is a good starter. But, you know, I think it's important to recognize that there is a conflict about this and people are not listening to the facts all the time. And that's it. Like just the idea of we need to understand that there is a conflict around this and do the best that we can to be thoughtful about that in our communication.
Yeah, you know, and because the frustrating part is you have two different scientific communities, each offering conflicting opinions of how they interpret the facts. So it all depends on which side you want to believe, and it's not just people, not lay people out there throwing around opinions. I mean, it's there are scientists on both sides who claim their version is correct. So it's just one of those things that people have to decide for themselves how they feel about it based on what they are able to find out from the scientific community, kind of like what we're going through now with everybody sitting home on a Friday instead of being at work.
There you
go. Another question or a comment here from Clint. I've never tested bleach on Bermuda grass, but I've diagnosed bleach damage. It's much like the organic herbicides, injury but regrowth of perennial species within 7 to 10 days.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Clint, for that.
Yeah.
Nope, there's some.
Yeah, can we apply salt to paspalum weeds? Does it have to be labeled?
Sure. I mean, it doesn't, but it's not sold, you know, as a labeled pesticide and regulated by the EPA or something like that. And there's a handful of organic herbicides too that are exempt from labeling. They're on that FIFRA 25B list, I think, where they are. They don't require registration or labeling with the EPA.
Yeah, we have a kind of a scattered two-part question here. I guess he's asking why haven't organic alternatives to glyphosate why haven't more been developed? I'm not sure what the question is here.
Well, I think that I think the question is, why don't we have herbicide active ingredients that work like glyphosate and are available like glyphosate? I think it's just difficult, I guess, the registration process of these. I would ask your local manufacturer rep about that. But glyphosate is so famous because it's so cheap and so abundant, and I'm sure that is related to the production pipeline of it, where most other herbicides cost more. And I don't know what it would take to bring price points down of some of these things.
Okay, here's a clarification. The synthetic alternatives to glyphosate, there are,
Right.
yeah, there's quite a few. I mean, even just walking through Lowe's, there are several that you can just pick off the shelf. Um, if you use salt, use pickling salt. Does not have the caking agent, so it mixes easy with less clogging of spray equipment. Interesting.
Okay, we're getting some. Yeah, thanks, Clint, again for some pro tips about applying salt.
And down in Georgia, where they know plenty about paspalum. So
yeah.
But all right. Well, if we'll hang on here if anybody else has any other comments or questions. Next webinar, just in a couple of days, I think next Wednesday, um, uh, is Bruce Williams, who's going to be talking to you about negotiating for success, and some of his content. It's not going to just be sort of canned and interviewing strategies, but he is tailoring some of his talk to negotiating for things that are relevant to some of the COVID-19 stuff that we have going on right now too. So go ahead and please plan on joining us for that Wednesday at 1 o'clock Eastern if you're free. And so with that, we'll wrap things up for today. Maggie, once again, thanks a lot for joining us. We really appreciate it. Everybody, thanks for spending some time with us today. And again, quick thanks to BASF and Brandt, everybody there for helping bring this to you. And we will talk to you next time. Everybody stay safe out there, and we'll see you around.